All right. Thank you so much. It's good to see some new and familiar faces. We are so glad you all can join us for City Solutions for Community Futures, the Water Justice Fund Addendum release. Many of you may be familiar with the Water Justice Fund, and as we've been working on this for quite some time, but we are really excited to release an addendum, like we like to call, that has more details and clear expectations, as well as details on how the city should be funding a stormwater fee, as well as creating a stormwater utility and where that funding should go. So if you were with us last year when we released the first report, that first report was really more of an overview of the things that we've learned from the community. But we are really, really excited to get Rebecca and Joey to talk about the polling data and the information that we've gathered. So let's jump right on in. Next slide. For those who are maybe not familiar with the Water Collaborative, we are an organization with a vision. We are all about innovation and really pushing our city and our state forward. We are a 501c3 community-based organization dedicated to connecting and strengthening our communities, working toward a future where we can all live and thrive with water. You may know us from other programs. We actually have 5 core programs, but really I would say maybe 12 all in total that we are working on at the local, state, and federal levels. We work at the intersection of policy, education, and art, but this is our core program for New Orleans and our vision for how we can make sure New Orleans is here for another 300 years. What the Water Justice Fund is, if you're not familiar, is a community build campaign to create a transparent and accountable stormwater management system that ensures everyone pays their fair share to address the growing challenges of New Orleans. For those who may not know, New Orleans does not have a stormwater utility. We have a utility that does stormwater, which dates back to the 1900s, but the state also doesn't have a stormwater utility. In fact, there are over 80 different stormwater utilities across the nation, and being that Louisiana is one of the rainiest cities in the country, as well as one that is dealing with compounding challenges around sea level rise, increasing climate risk and disasters, it is incredibly important for us to have a stormwater utility, especially as funding is dwindling in many of these areas. It is our responsibility as a city to fund our own stormwater management and make sure we do so in a holistic, clear way, and one that is not piecemeal, which is what we've been doing for the last 100 years. Next slide. So as mentioned, we've been working on this for quite some time. Those who know me, I'm the executive director of the Water Collaborative, and this was one of our core programs from the very beginning. And those who are with me on this journey know that I did many, how would I put it, interviews. And one of the things that people said resoundingly is that New Orleans needs a stormwater fee. But back then, almost 60 years ago, people didn't know what that looked like. So we've gone on a journey of steps to really understand how this can come together and what this can look like that would benefit not just New Orleans and our physical infrastructure, but the people who live here. So in 2021 through 2022, we created our first committees and we began researching and data collection. This is also when we started working with our partners at WaterNow, who helped us collect a lot of the data that you'll find in the Water Justice Fund Addendum report. And during that time, we also had another bill passed, HB 713, that basically said, hey, stormwater utilities can exist in New Orleans, and they should. And that was actually a resounding yes at the state legislature. So that also gave us an open door to see this forward. In 2023, we took all the data that we gathered, and knowing that the state, hey, we didn't have any barriers at the state level, we hosted a 10-part workshop series. And in that workshop series, we went through many details about how a stormwater fee works, but also how New Orleans works and why it's unique, how it's functioning well, and maybe how it has some challenges. In that time, from the 10-part workshop series, we had over 120 people attend, which is unprecedented for something that could be very nuanced and complicated. Actually, I like to tell people within 2 weeks' time, every single workshop series was on a waiting list, which really shows a desire and excitement around having a stormwater fee in New Orleans. We also, at that very same year, at the end of the workshop series, had a campaign kickoff to say, hey, we have details, we have data, we have community feedback, and we're going to begin this process. We also did a community campaign where we door knocked and called texted, and we door knocked over 10,000 doors in the city of New Orleans in every single district. And then we continue to do more policy development. At this time, there was also HB 409 that passed, and HB 409 really just kind of gave more guidelines to HB 713 and saying, hey, if you're going to do a stormwater fee, it needs to be a municipal vote of the residents of that particular community, whether it be your parish or your city. And so that also gave us more definition on how to get something like this passed. In February 2024, we released our biggest report, the last one that you guys have seen, and where we really outlined all of the details from 2021 up until 2024. We gave the city a lot of information, as well as residents who were really interested in this, but we know that wasn't enough. And then we started moving forward. July through September, we did merchant corridor surveys and interviews with over 200 businesses, many of whom have experienced flooding, to understand, hey, how is our business community processing and understanding this information? And is this something they would be excited about? Because of course, this is going to potentially be a part of how their business is going to function in the future. And which I'll let Joey talk about that data, which in the next couple of slides. We also did an independent residential voter poll in September of last year. I love the data. I'm really excited to show you that. So I'm going to keep that under locks until we get there. But let's just say the time is now. People are ready and they are excited about a stormwater fee. And there is nothing standing in our way in terms of getting this done if we bring it to a vote of the people today. Lastly, I'll say we did more of a nationwide stormwater utility case study with WaterNow. So we brought them back and looking at Baltimore and Philadelphia and other cities to really understand how do cities budget for things like this. We also had budget discussions with 6 different city agencies to really understand what are the budgetary needs and concerns and what is realistic for them to receive from this fund. I want to also add to this that the Water Justice Fund isn't just a fund. It isn't just more money in the pockets of the city of New Orleans. It's more money in the pockets of the people of New Orleans. Unlike other stormwater utilities that are all over the country, where the money goes straight into another utility for their own pet projects or capital projects, that will be a part of it because we do need to catch up with our aging and dilapidated infrastructure. But a big chunk of this funding is going towards lifting the city of New Orleans up. A rising tide raises all ships, and that's what the Water Justice Fund does. It funds projects that are neighborhood scale. You fund your programs like the CAP program and homes. And so I just want to give people understanding that all of this data here that we've collected over the last 4 years isn't just to show that the city needs to collect more money, it's to show that the city needs to invest in its people. And we've seen enough data over the last couple of years that are not even related to stormwater management that emphasizes that. So I'll hand it to the next slide where Rebecca will get into, as I like to say, the meat and potatoes of it all. But I really want to emphasize that this fund is not just a stormwater utility. It is a future program for how New Orleans can re-envision itself. So thank you all so much, and I'll hand it to our policy director, Rebecca Malta.
Thank you, Jessica. Yes, we're going to get into the meat and potatoes of this. And we're going to try to do it succinctly in the half hour that we have for this presentation and then open it up to your questions after. Everybody should at some point today have access to the report to really read through it. I want to start with some key definitions first to make sure that we're all set up for success on this journey. We use these terms a lot throughout the presentation and throughout the addendum and throughout our report. And so I just want to make sure that everybody understands exactly what we're talking about. So the first is stormwater management, which really refers to the physical infrastructure itself, but also the people who operate and maintain those systems and manage those programs and projects around drainage management and stormwater management. Impervious surface area is land cover that does not absorb water. I mean, that's pretty much the definition, which in a lot of ways means concrete sidewalks, driveways, parking lots, roofs. It just does not allow water to move through into the ground. Gray stormwater infrastructure is the catch basins, it's the pipes, it's the pumping stations, the culverts, the man-made canals, et cetera, everything that essentially Sewage and Water Board and DPW have been running that actually capture that stormwater and move it out to Lake Pontchartrain. Green stormwater infrastructure, on the other hand, is complementary to gray stormwater infrastructure in that they mimic natural systems. They're green spaces or things such as permeable pavement that actually naturally capture the water and allow it to absorb back into the ground and therefore reduce flooding on the spot and take the burden off of the drainage system. And then equivalent residential unit is a little trickier to explain. I'm going to do my best, and I'm happy to answer questions during the Q&A if there's anything lingering. But essentially, it's a standard unit of measurement based on the average or median size of a single family residential property within a city or a parish. And it's used to calculate a stormwater fee. So essentially, when we're talking about these large commercial and industrial properties, what are they going to pay? What's the equivalent unit? 5, right? And so that commercial property would be paying 5 equivalent residential units or ERUs. And so every ERU rate is set differently depending on the city and the needs of that city. Whether that's $10, $20, $3, $50, whatever that sort of looks like. So that commercial property would be paying 5 times that one ERU. So that's sort of how that works. And we'll get more into that as we go into the formula and the details around a fee for New Orleans specifically. Next slide, please, Kari. So we also, I just want to briefly go over the recommendations that we had. Many of them are the exact same as they were in our original report. Some have shifted slightly based on feedback and continued research. The first being that we want to create a Department of Stormwater Management. This originally in the original report said Department of Office and Resilience, but we want to make it really clear that what this department is set up to do is stormwater management. So that would include administering a fee, a stormwater fee, which we would need to establish, essentially bringing in that money, collecting that money, and then distributing it to the various programs and agencies that run stormwater management, actually deal with the infrastructure itself, as well as just being the overseeing agency for all of the various projects and programs that are ongoing throughout the city. As well as maintaining a public website, right? If we do get this stood up, we want them to maintain a public website as well. I will say the first 2 bullet points on here, creating that department and establishing a stormwater fee, those would have to go on a ballot to be voted by the public specifically. So we're excited to hopefully get that to happen maybe later this year, and I'll let Jessica and Joey talk more about our next steps later in the presentation. But again, they'd have to maintain a public website where there's information on how people would pay a fee, where that money is going, et cetera, programs that exist. And then it would also have to be overseen by a community advisory board. And so our recommendations in the Water Justice Fund is to comprise that board of 9 members, 5 that are chosen by city council members, and 4 that are chosen by the chief resilience officer within the governor's office. And then phasing in tax properties. So right now, residents and tax-paying businesses are already paying millages. We've been paying millages for a long time for stormwater management. So when this is initially rolled out, only tax-exempt properties would be paying a stormwater fee. That is very important to us within this fund. Only those entities would pay. And as the millages expire, then we would roll in residents and tax-paying businesses. This is meant to be very equitable and fair. It's a fair payment structure, and that's what we're really looking for. We also need to make sure that there's enough funding for gray infrastructure and operations and maintenance, right? So all of those catch basins and pipes and pumping stations, right now there is not enough adequate funding. And so we want to make sure that a percentage of revenue from a stormwater fee is guaranteed for those operations. We're right now in our report, it's at 30%. The fee would be based on impervious surface area, which we talked about with the equivalent residential unit. How much impervious surface area does a commercial or industrial or multifamily home have on it? And that is how we calculate the fee. If and when residents are rolled into a stormwater fee, right, single family homes would pay based on a tiered structure. So smaller homes would pay the smallest amount, a flat rate. Medium-sized homes would pay a flat rate a little bit above that, and large homes would pay a flat rate a little bit more above that. And again, there's more details in the actual report itself. And then because we're asking people to pay, we want to make sure that we're providing incentives to reduce people's fees and also reduce the burden on the stormwater system, right? So we would love to provide incentives like implementing green infrastructure on your private property, which could reduce your fee and therefore reduce the burden on the system, as well as greening initiatives. If you volunteer with a greening initiative, that may be a way to reduce your fee as well. But it's not just on residents and businesses to do this too. We want to make sure that the city is set up to do this as well. So we want to make sure that there's dedicated funding specifically for green infrastructure programs for the city. That could look like pocket parks, reforestation efforts, obviously maintenance for all these green spaces itself, as well as those grant programs so that people can implement this. And then, of course, if anybody is truly has a financial burden from a stormwater fee, hardship exemptions would be provided as well. But the ultimate deal is we need enough money to make all of these programs viable. We need enough money to make sure that our systems are working, the infrastructure itself is working. So there has to be a minimum fee to ensure for all properties to ensure that that is the case. Next slide, please, Cree. And so just going back quickly to what Jessica said, all of this research, these recommendations didn't come out of thin air. We talked with community members. We've talked with so many different stakeholders, but we also worked with WaterNow Alliance, as Jessica alluded to do a very in-depth case study of stormwater utilities across the country, best practices, common practices around governance, models, around budgets, around operations, around rate structures. And so shout out to Caroline and Andrew, who I think are on the call right now, because they really did this in-depth study for us over the last few months. And we're so grateful to them for that. But just a couple of highlights from that report that they did. 74% of stormwater utilities are actually a part of a city government. So they're not a standalone district. They actually are part of the government itself. And that's what we're proposing to do, right? A dedicated stormwater department within the city. 62% of fees are based on that impervious surface area, which again, that's what we want to accomplish. That is a common practice. It's an equitable practice. And then obviously higher rates exist for larger systems and larger populations. And that's just because of the vast amount of infrastructure that it takes, right? And so I bring this up in particular because New Orleans is a fairly medium-sized population in the grand scheme of an urban landscape. But we have a vast system, right? We have a lot of drainage needs in this city. And so our fees, typically they look higher when we talk about implementing a fee for the city of New Orleans, because our system requires so much maintenance and so many upgrades. And then most of that revenue that is generated from a stormwater fee is spent on operating expenses. Only about 25% in general is spent on capital investments, which are basically upgrades to the system. And then an even smaller amount is spent on green stormwater infrastructure for projects typically on public property. But what cities like Philadelphia are finding, who have had longstanding successful stormwater programs, they've implemented almost as much as they can on public property. And they really need to start looking at private property to reduce flooding and meet their flood reduction goals. And so the way we've always been thinking about the Water Justice Fund is that it is a holistic approach to stormwater management, right? So that's why we don't just say, let's have money for great infrastructure. We really need to incorporate all these programs, projects that incorporate green infrastructure into the system as well. And I will hand it over to Joey to talk more about our polling data and what we've found out over this last year and a half.
Yeah, thanks, Rebecca. I love that. It's a good segue because it is holistically, we made sure from the very beginning of the campaign, if you're new to us, that we were making the community voice and those who are affected most the center of what we were building and how we were building it. And so not only did we go to the experts at WaterNow to find what the nation was doing, we also were like, let's take ourselves out of the equation and do a poll across the city. So the LJR Custom Strategies did a poll for us with 100 people from each district in New Orleans. And so about 500 people responded to the survey, and there's some really great information that we found on there. To highlight a couple of the demographics that will let you know who was responding to us the most. 67% of those respondents were people who had been in New Orleans for 31 or more years. So it tells us that these people are residents, the ones who are here for a long time and for the good time. 69% of those were residential property owners. So these are people who have invested into the city infrastructure and are at the base paying into drainage, but not seeing the results that they need or seeing anything changing for them, just getting harder with more storms, et cetera. And so the poll gathered understanding and opinion of the status quo, city offices and agencies, thoughts and feelings on them, stormwater practices, whether or not they knew how that worked, they knew what they were paying, engage the likely support of a stormwater fee and the creation of the department, and what facets of the recommendations that y'all just heard and community focus points would make support more or less likely. And so not only did it kind of give all of this stuff, but we really started with the residents' experiences and the residents' experiences and concerns that stood out to us. One that you'll see on the screen there is that more than 50% of voters experienced damage to a residence or vehicle during a rain or flooding event other than a hurricane. And as we know, as we've seen over the past couple of years, especially last year, the amount of rain that's hitting in the first few hours of these storms, the pumps cannot handle that. It is 4-inch rainstorms are incredibly damaging to spots in the city that are not built to handle that kind of drainage. Some facts that came in there, you'll see at the bottom is that 73% of voters viewed flood insurance as a financial burden, which that makes a lot of sense. So not only are we talking about insurance in general, we're talking about flood insurance as itself. And so if there's a way that we can support our communities to be able to maybe have less stress, to pay less into that, it starts a conversation that becomes a much bigger facet of making sure, like Jessica said, New Orleans is around for another 300 years. So on the next slide, you'll see their experiences inform what they would support and what they wanted to see in the city. So we really wanted to see this correlation. 91% of voters believe that we need a new approach to stormwater management, which is huge, right? And so as we're giving people this survey to kind of paint the picture, again, we talked to 3,200 residents as we knocked those 10,000 doors. We talked to all those people. And so there may be some signs that they've seen, commercials, et cetera. But the amount of knowledge of the stormwater fee and like what could happen, we wanted to gauge that as well. And so initially, at the beginning of the survey, 66% of residents supported a new utility and 53% of residents are for establishing a fee. After education and after more polling, we saw those numbers rise to 71 and 57% respectively. So it's clear to us that voters value transparency and accountability and seeing what could happen to their neighborhoods. And so 75% are likely to support a community-built fee. So knowing that over 3,200 people had responded and given their input. 79% are more likely to support knowing that tax-exempt properties would pay, balancing that system, creating equity, creating a fair system that is best practice. And then 79% are more likely to support a fee with the public transparency, like a website, like a community advisory board that presents reports and they can see where their money is going. And so not only that transparency, but supporting what the fee would go to. And so again, like Rebecca said, it's not just capital projects. We've seen how that kind of works and how much needs to go to that percentage-wise from the fee, but also 85% of voters there in the green would support the fund going towards programs that would directly assist residents, nonprofits, and other businesses improve drainage on their properties. 91% support that going to parks and green spaces that improve quality of life. And then 89% support it going to green infrastructure that could create places around the city like the Gentilly Resiliency District, like other parks and green spaces, like incorporating green infrastructure into parks and playgrounds to reduce the heat, right? And so these are all connected to what we're seeing. And so voters who have lived in New Orleans a long time and own property here support the fund increasing the quality of life for all residents. And increasing the community-based action towards storm and flood management, because we know we can't be reactive to these things, especially as 75% that when they know 3,000 residents have helped build this plan. Resilience, which our city has tons of, is not enough. We need a plan that harnesses our strengths as a city. And so I think that owner and executive chef of Grigri and St. John, Eric Cook, said it very well. Our neighborhoods make New Orleans great. And to be a good neighbor means you take care of and protect your neighborhood. It's time to make our voices heard and protect our neighborhoods from flooding and storms. And so not only did we have a third-party poll, on the next slide, you'll see that we also, again, went to those communities and businesses and said, we know that you are the heart of New Orleans. We know that our neighborhoods are. So we made sure that doing the business corridor and merchant interviews, that it was representative. And so we went to every district. We walked Magazine Street. We walked the main corridors in the east. We went across the river to Algiers Point. There's multiple ways that we said that we are going to make sure that everyone's voice is heard, knowing that those business owners can't just be called because they're busy. They're busy surviving. They're busy with, we know what the last 6 months in New Orleans has looked like, all these events and things going on. And so we conducted over 200 of those interviews from July to November, and businesses shared their stories and really shared their realities of the difficulty and worry of preparing for and adapting to storms of all kinds. For executive chef and multi-restaurateur Nina Compton, she said her Marigny Bywater location has flooding that affects employee and guest access and the parking at least once a month over that 6-month plan. Or over that 6-month period. So we asked, what were these disruptions like? Over a 6-month period, how many times does it flood? Do you have to close your business? And so what we did see was that about half of businesses experienced physical flooding in the building or immediately around and had to close for adjusted business hours. And so that's showing us that, like, beyond that, though, that's creating a system of like worry and anxiety and stress that affects the business. And so those turned into long-term business risks. And so they highlighted larger concerns, ongoing drainage issues, delayed or non-existent infrastructure repairs, overall worry pertaining to the future of their business from storms or other financial strains, because we know that those are compiling all together. And the fact of the matter is they are already paying into drainage and not getting benefits with increased storms. These findings reinforce the urgent need for resilient stormwater management strategies and infrastructure investments to support businesses and ensure long-term economic stability across New Orleans. So you've heard all what this looks like for everyone else. You've heard what we've done. You've heard all the information. So let's take a look on the next slide. You'll see actually a real live example of what we've created for y'all. And so if you want to do it along with us, you can scan that QR code there. It is also available on the website. If not, I'm going to pick one of you. Just kidding. I won't do that. So this gives you a whole, as you do this, it kind of explains what we've already explained. Do I own a tax-exempt property in Orleans Parish? Let's go ahead and say I don't, because I physically don't. So I'm like, okay, but I'm a resident. I'm still worried about what I'm going to pay. You're already paying. If you pay property taxes, you pay into the millages, which is another word for like city tax. So a percentage of that goes to it. So you're already doing your fair share. So let's go ahead and go back and say that I do own a property. So again, it'll tell you exactly what you need to do. And so I'll reiterate what's been said before, is that we went based off of the parcel size and then assumed about 75% of that parcel, which is just like your entirety of property. 75% of that is probably impervious, which means that it's the building or that it's concrete, etc. And so this is your entire parcel you're putting in, but the fee will be based off of the impervious surface. So on my property tax bill, let's say that my beautiful large art studio is 4,222 square feet. And by art studio, I mean my house that I do art in. So my property's monthly stormwater fee is estimated to be about $86. Okay, so let's see, okay, what does that look like in the formula for a whole year? Yearly stormwater fee, okay, $1,000. that sounds great. I don't have that. What if I can't pay that? Oh my God, another expense. What is this going to be? My small business is going to shutter. The yoga's on pause. No one's coming in. It's too hot in the summer. The next slide shows you, right? We got you. We know that this is how it's going to be. So we have built-in incentives, credits, hardship exemptions that can reduce the fee. And so very specific ways. We're not just saying there's changes that can make. Don't worry, you may not pay. It's we will literally give other options and connect community resources for you. And that is why when we get to what you're going to see about the governance structure or how we're doing this, establishing a stormwater office allows for us to integrate all the things that are beautiful and great about New Orleans to address the problems rather than creating a whole new entity that tries to take on all those problems by themselves. Increasing permeability on your properties to enhance on-site stormwater retention. I don't know how to do that. Do I just dig a hole? Great. We actually have built-in ways that community partnerships can be accessed on the website. That's strange that we don't even have, to give people a way to say, hey, can I help? Can I come help plant trees? New Orleans lost 80% of the tree canopy during Katrina, and we have not gotten back to that number. Doing things like that help lower the heat island effect. It reduces the heat. It can be up to 15 degrees hotter in the lower Ninth Ward, where there is more concrete, less drainage, less trees than it is in the lower Garden District. And so these are real ways that we can start to change that to create a more fair and equitable city. And again, hardship exemptions, it gets into that. Everything will be fairly assessed. So, Kree, if you go to the next one, you can see it'll tell you too, like, this isn't just like hypothetical, right? And Rebecca's going to get into this into a minute. But that's the formula that we use. If you're looking along, in the report right now, you'll see it kind of laid out a little bit more. But let's go to the next slide as well, Kree. And that the last slide there is like, if you want to learn more, that connects you right to the website. It's where you can download the reports, you can download the addendum, you can ask us questions, you can get involved. That's what that takes you to there. And then go ahead and we can go to the next slide there. And Rebecca will get in there and tell you a little bit about exactly what we're talking about here.
Thank you, Joey. Like I said, I'm gonna do my best. Joey has alluded to this. So we know we were working on sort of both ends of the spectrum to come up with our fee and the formula that we needed to use, right? We know that we need, long story short, about $50 million annually to supplement what already currently exists for green infrastructure and gray infrastructure to pass along to all these different agencies who do this very important work, right? But we also know that we have 4,667 tax-exempt properties in the city. We use 2023 tax assessor data to gather up these properties. There are over 13,000 tax-exempt properties. Many of them, however, are city-owned, or they're just vacant lots of land with nothing on them. So those entities would not pay into a stormwater fee. So these 4,667 tax-exempt properties would pay into a fee immediately. And so how do we get to that $50 million need with these 4,667 properties? So we also know, as Joey said, the city only has data on parcel size. So we have had to estimate the amount of impervious surface area for properties in general, and research says that about 75 to 85% of urban, commercial, and industrial properties have impervious surface area on them. We were conservative in our number just so that we could see what we need to do. And so we use 75% in our formula. So you take your parcel size and you multiply that by 0.75, and that comes up with the hypothetical or, estimated amount of impervious surface area on your property. We also know that the average single-family residence size is approximately 1,850 square feet. Sometimes it goes up to about 2,000 square feet, but we know that there are a lot of camelbacks in this city, and as well as two-story homes. And so we went with 1,850 for our model. So that is that number that is equivalent to 1 ERU. So essentially you take that amount of impervious surface area, that parcel size times 0.75, and you divide that by the ERU amount, by that 1,850. And that gets you to the number of ERUs that you would pay. And then what we went from there and said, okay, if this is the number we need, how do we get to 50 million? And we played around, is $20 enough? Is $30 enough? $60 too much? We arrived at $50 per ERU, which feels like a lot, but again, our system is vastly in need. And this doesn't impact residents and tax-paying businesses. This is only impacting tax-exempt businesses. And the range is very different, right? If you own a small parcel, you're going to pay a lot less. It's not a terrible burden on you. If you own a ton of land, it is going to be more money. But essentially, multiplying that by 50 gets you your number for your monthly fee. And then obviously, if you multiply that by 12, that generates your annual fee. And so $50 per ERU for these 4,667 tax-exempt properties in our model generated $52.84 million in revenue for the city annually. And that's really what we need to get to. And I hope that was very clear. We're going to go into a couple of examples now. There are tables this table is in the document itself in the addendum. I'm not going to go over all of this, but it's just to show you the range and the estimated annual fees. So if you're a smaller property like Cabrini High School or Thrive New Orleans, you're paying several $1,000s, not a whole lot. Hospital systems and smaller universities would be paying, in the several $100,000. And then, of course, sorry for the Tulane folks who I know are on this call. There's 5.5 million square feet of parcel size for you guys. It's over $1 million that they would estimated to pay. And again, this is all hypothetical because the city would have to go through and actually calculate impervious surface area for properties. And of course, I know Tulane and other universities and schools, they do tend to try to put in stormwater management systems, green infrastructure on their properties. They do a lot. So again, as we've talked about, there are ways to reduce that fee and sometimes significantly reduce that fee. And then if we just go on, because I wanted to give you a little bit of a visual representation. So we have, we put it into categories of small, medium, large, and extra large properties. It's just a few examples of those. So Greenlight New Orleans, for example, would pay $62 per month because they have that one parcel that they own. And again, I am not calling anybody out here. We just wanted to give examples, and these are the ones that we chose. Want to be very, very clear about that. And mindful of who was on this call as well. Broadmoor Community Church would pay $375 per month because their parcel size is just over 18,000. And then if we keep going, Crew of Iris, they own a couple of warehouses, for example. Their fee would be just under $2,000 for their parcel size. Dryads YMCA would be just over $2,000, $2,300 per month. And you can see too with our formula, right? With each of these, there's about at least 75% of impervious surface area on these properties, right? And that's what we're really looking at. So our formula didn't come out of nowhere. It sort of tracks with what we're seeing across the city as well. So Turo Medical Complex, with all the buildings that they have, many of us are familiar, they would pay about 12 grand per month. The Tchoupitoulas Walmart, if you can believe it, they go through their business trust. So they have tax exempt property. They don't pay anything. They would have to pay $16,500 per month approximately. And then, of course, as you get into your larger or extra large properties like the Superdome, who has barely any green spaces on their property. I do know that they have some stormwater reduction below their property, but they would be paying closer to $60,000 per month, and the convention center just under $100,000 per month. And again, this was all using our formula. And I just really want to stress that it is hypothetical. It could be higher or lower for folks, but it gives a really clear estimate of what this could look like.
Yeah. And so at this point, you may be like, okay, where's all the money going? One of the big sentiments that we've seen too is like a distrust, right? We trust patterns. We know that when things happen, fool me once, fool me twice. Once is an anomaly, twice is a coincidence, three times is a pattern, right? So these are some things that we definitely have in mind when we want to assure you that we have met with city agencies. We have gone over this multiple times, and the governance model really, again, centers, you can see the Department of Stormwater Management right there in the middle. It centers the community at the heart of it, which is what makes New Orleans so special. And it also is the way that the structures of how we engage with communities should be. So establishing the Department of Stormwater Management, it will focus on I'll tell you a little bit about what these will be doing, how things change, how the governmental structure will look like. The Department of Stormwater Management, which will be new, will focus on the fee administration, coordinating projects and programs across the city, and other departments that you see there in the red. This will serve as the policy and public communications of the integrated approach, featuring regular updates and detailed reports for other offices and the public. And so what you see there on the sides there, the Community Advisory Board and the New Orleans City Council are, again, ways that we're incorporating or believe should be incorporating some oversight, some kind of checks and balances, right? One, knowing that there's a lot of work. There's a lot of bureaucracy. There's a lot of red tape because that's just how politics and city government works. That's how it should work. But making sure that those are accessible and making sure that those are tracked and traceable is another thing. And so with that, the oversight from the city council will be focused on the finances, the management, and the administration of the Department of Stormwater Management. And the oversight from an established advisory board, which would be similar to the Southeast Louisiana Flood Protection Boards, would be focused on reports, fund allocation, and then project and program prioritization. And so, again, not putting all the power in one spot and not putting all the responsibility in one spot as well. And so the next section you see there is where it's set up to see where the money is flowing to. All those little red things give you the overline items of infrastructure agencies, right? Okay, well, who is that? Sewage and Water Board and the Department of Parks and Parkways. That is our gray and green infrastructure that Rebecca gave us a little bit of an idea of before. And so that's very focused on updating those infrastructures and the maintenance of. Resilience offices. That includes the Office of Resilience and Sustainability, which is currently an office in City Hall. The Office of Homeland Security and Emergency Preparedness, which is like a hazard mitigation office. And so those are focused on emergency preparedness, sustainability through data-driven strategies, hazard planning, and public safety tools for a sustained future. And so these are all things that these are what we are saying they would be focusing on with the specific amounts of money. They do things like this now, and they also may do more than this, but just so you know, this is kind of where we're saying where those funds would go. In the community section, right? Residents, businesses, nonprofits, potentially insurance. New Orleans Redevelopment Authority, so that's NORA, that has the CAP program. And this would also include the Chief Administrative Office. And so it's really there, if you've heard of the CAP program, that's kind of like the fortified roofs, the different opportunities for people to become prepared for storms and things like that. This would focus on public and private property upgrades. And then it could potentially affect the FEMA rating that we have, which would affect, hopefully and potentially, a parametric insurance relationship, which that's a whole entire other conversation. We just know that that is at the heart of some of these things. Talking to the city offices, we can't change the insurance until we change our rating. We can't change the rating until we do this. So there's multiple things at play there. So if you have any questions about that, happy to go into a little bit more depth about the hypotheticals or potential of that. But we wanted to put that in there just to say that that is an option. And in the financing tools, the other part there, working with the Finance Authority of New Orleans, green banks, they would support green infrastructure projects. And so low interest loans, grants, partnerships, provides opportunity for adaptive strategies and more options for us as a city. And so in the next slide, you're going to see kind of like the breakdown of the money that Rebecca's saying that we're bringing in, right? With about $50 million, give or take a couple, with our estimated being 52, a little bit of leeway here. And so the specifics of this, you're like, well, what is the money actually going to in that office? Not just their overall goals. What are the actual like missions? What are the objectives that those offices would have? So going from largest amount received to lowest, the Department of Stormwater Management, so that brand new office standing up, it would be a staff, a website, data collection for deciding the fee amount, like we're saying with the parcel, and impervious surface measuring, with kind of, again, running basically the process that we did with more information and tools. Program tracking to see where the money is going, money for capital projects, and then debt financing as well. Sewage and Water Board, employee hiring, training, community engagements, the operations of the great infrastructure, the debt financing that is current and upcoming, and then neighborhood projects and education, utilizing their Department of Environmental Affairs. So again, what we see from the beginning of this, I know that Sewage and Water Board can be contentious. There's a lot of things going on and have been going on. What I will say is that the amount of money coming in is only estimated from them at about half, if not less than half of the money that they need to just handle the great infrastructure. So by taking and implementing this system, we are taking stress off of that system and also putting forth more resources that are tracked, that are accountable, that are literally you can log on and see what's happening with those. With NORA, the Redevelopment Authority, training, community partnership agreements, expanding the eligibility and geography of some of those green infrastructure projects like the fortified roofs. With ORS, that's going to be more like the data collection on hazard mitigation around storms, tropical events, heat, and energy as well. And then working with other green infrastructure working on other green infrastructure projects with other agencies. Right now, ORS is a fantastic tool that has a very large funnel top with a very small funnel output. Because of the amount of things that they could be doing. And so setting them up to be a partnership organization, partnership agency with other offices, again, is fueling this fire that we say it needs to be a holistic approach that we've been talking about. Parks and parkways, that's going to be some data collecting. Again, around the tree canopy, I saw that going on in the chat. Expanding our forestry division, other community partnership agreements and contractors, green space maintenance and incorporating green infrastructure into parks and playgrounds, right? Creating a more robust service instead of just doing maintenance of trees, etc. And then NOSEP, it's the Office of Hazard Mitigation down there. Data collection around flooding, our warning systems, underpass and road flood sensors that they've already gotten some good amount of money for, but keeping that kind of mitigation, understanding those numbers, bringing on some community partnerships, with local universities and other community partners who are also doing that kind of work. That's one of the most beautiful things in New Orleans is that 90% of the time somebody's thought about this idea or somebody's working on it. How can we connect the larger players? How can we connect our policy and structures to be able to funnel that work that's already happening into a holistic approach to address the things that we need to as a community? And then on the next slide, we're going to dive into what's next, right? So you may be like, okay, great amount of information, Joey. What am I supposed to do? What do you want from me? Which, so many things. But really what you can see in the next 6 months for us, what we're really looking at is we've now come back around and said, here are some specifics. We want this to make sense to you and your communities. So one will be hosting some sector-focused roundtables around different demographics of people, businesses, those who are already paying, those who aren't paying, how can I support, what will I pay? And so that will help map out a plan for further community support and hopefully for endorsements. This can be something like residents, which you see that the community sessions there in number 2, or it can be like, hey, this business organization or all along Magazine Street, we would love to have something like that. So you can actually, on the next slide, you'll see a couple of QR codes that I'll get into, but you can actually let us know and we can help set up those educational meetings for you. Again, the community sessions, continuing to commit education across all the 5 districts, connecting neighborhoods, letting people know that they're not alone in this and that we have those stories of the most affected at the heart of what we're doing. And then really what we essentially need from you is to be vocal and ask for change. This is, again, New Orleans has a lot of great ideas. Our city council and our representatives hear great ideas all the time or know the things that are wrong. Let's give them something that is actually tangible for them to be able to take on and change. And so on the next slide, you'll see both of the things, because like Rebecca said, this will need to be put forth to a vote. So we need this to be an ordinance, and that will be hopefully on the ballot in November to establish a stormwater department and to create the fee. And so right there on the left side, you can scan these with your phone. Again, Taya's putting them in the chat, and they are also available in the document as well and on our website. And so you can reach out to us, write your reps. Both of those go to different links, but please, we were very responsive to those. And we would love to have your help on that. I know that I'm running a little bit long, so I'm going to We can go to the final slide if we want, or we can leave it up on this one, and then we can start to get into a little bit of a Q&A. Were there any questions in the chat that had not been answered yet that we can help with?
Yeah, Joey, there was a question, I think, from Dana about Mandy Landry's bill. So I think that's probably on the top of a lot of folks' mind. Would you mind maybe Rebecca and you giving an overview of what it is and how it's different, and then we can go from there. I think that was the only question that I saw. There were some questions on our trees, but otherwise, that's the only one that I saw.
Great.
This was on the Mandy Landry bill and and the governance. Yes. So essentially Mandy Landry has put out a bill this year, HB 609, to establish a stormwater fee for the city of New Orleans. But the model, the legislation is not entirely robust. There's not a ton of detail, but it does give control of rate setting to the Public Service Commission, which is a state appointed entity, right? And then the money would go directly to Sewage and Water Board to be able to fund their operations and management. The other thing in there is that everybody would be paying immediately. So it does not say that people who already pay the millage are exempt from paying a stormwater fee. Everybody pays into a stormwater fee. So essentially residents and tax-paying businesses would be paying both a millage and a stormwater fee through this legislation. We know that right now our state government landscape looks a little bit different than it did in the last couple of years. And so essentially with the Community Advisory Board, and I want to clarify, nobody would be appointing a head of the Stormwater Management Department. What we are talking about is the Community Advisory Board. So these are folks who are knowledgeable in engineering, who are knowledgeable in water management, architecture, landscape architecture, the community at large. They are part of the community. They are just nominated by the city council and the chief resilience officer, which just happens to be housed in the governor's office. And this is, again, we are always trying to provide neutral ground positions, right, to much of the work that we do. And, how can we be the middleman and figure this out? And so that is a way to do that. We are not fond of the Public Service Commission setting rates either. Rates would be set, through the Stormwater Management Department, and overseen obviously by City Council the way that it currently is, as well as this Community Advisory Board, which would have access to be able to say, how are you using that money? How are you setting those rates? They ask the hard questions, right? And they say, well, this is what we think you should focus on, or what needs to happen for the city. And again, so it keeps that community control of a stormwater fee and stormwater management, so that the community has a say and they have input. So just to be very, very clear about that, we are not at all advocating that anybody from the state is appointing a head of a stormwater management department by any means.
No. Would you like to add anything or no?
No, I mean, I think that's great. I think a big takeaway that's like a positive, right, is that this is a thing. It's essential that we address this now. It's clear that it's on a lot of hearts and a lot of minds and a lot of experiences. But we bring into this 5 years worth of research, 4 years worth of a community engagement, and a complete decentering of ourselves. I don't get to be on the board, right? I don't, those kinds of things we want to also be very mindful of that, is that we are community minded in going into this, and especially in those next steps. That's why you are so essential to this next few months.
Yeah. Thank you. And I just want to add, I did, please add your questions to the chat, and I already see the chat is moving. I also removed the mute enforcement, so you can unmute if I read your question and you feel like you want to add or elaborate. That is now an opportunity for you to do. Eva has a question. Her question is, have you been talking to anyone at the City Council about this? What have those conversations been like? And can you say more about the ballot initiative? It would be one ballot initiative to create both the department and the fee, and that's a question. Rebecca, you want to start with that?
Sure. So the very quick answer is it would be separate ballot measures. They would not go on the same ballot. It would be hopefully at the same time we could get these set up in the mayoral election this year, but they would be different ballot measures to create both the department, one for the department and one for the fee itself. And of course, we've been in touch with the city and city council about this from the very beginning. They help to give us guidance in a lot of ways on these our initial set of recommendations, as well as, hey, this is what we need to see to support a stormwater fee and to actually write the ordinance. We need hard numbers. And so that's what we're providing in our addendum. We're giving them sort of the missing pieces that would needed to guide the work that they could do on an ordinance, right? And that's why we say everything is hypothetical, because it's ultimately not up to us, but we're trying to put all the pieces together for them. And we need to go back and continue conversations, right? After this addendum has come out with city council members and city agencies. Have we captured this correctly? Is this what you are looking for? Does this sound right to you? And those are, again, phase 3 conversations just this year alone to try to get something set up.
And I would add that I think as maybe Rebecca alluded to, we are hoping to have it be a ballot measure this year.
Yep.
Time is of the essence, and I just want to give just an example with the funding freezes at the federal level. A lot of the resilience projects are no longer moving, right? So tree plantings, projects on disaster preparedness. There was BRIC funding, 781 million that was frozen. We need to be able to concretely create our own funding so we can continue to ensure New Orleans is going to, like I said, be here for another 300 years and not be solely dependent on federal funding as we currently are. Louisiana as a state is almost entirely dependent on federal funding for these type of projects. So just wanted to elaborate a little bit more about why the importance of having them as a theme. Eva, if there's anything else you want to, is there any other questions you want to ask if you want to unmute before we move on? I'll move on, and if Ava, if you want to, you can drop something else in the chat. And then Dana, we definitely hear you about the PSC setting rates, and the State Department and agencies don't seem to understand or care for New Orleans. We recommend always talking to your elected officials. So if you want to reach out to Representative Landry or your personal rep, I'm not sure who your rep is, but please reach out to them and let them know why you care about the Water Justice Fund and why you think this should go forward. That politicians in our city, not just locally, but statewide, need to understand that this is a movement and it matters. So again, Joey had those 2 QR codes up there.
Yeah, if we can move back one slide, Kari, I can tell you a little bit before we jump to the next question, kind of about like some more details. Really, in the Right to Your Reps, whenever you scan that, it's a one-click politics. It gives you a little bit of information about the Water Justice Fund again on the left-hand side, and then it's like an endorsement form / once you fill in all those boxes, it will populate for you at the bottom who your reps are, who your city council members are. And so you can actually, we've pre-written a few emails for you, and you can add some stuff in there. You don't need to add dear so-and-so or thank you so much. Those are already put in from the organization of those, but you can go ahead and write something very specific and why it's very important to you. But we gave some of that. So there's a lot of good options for that. And then the one on the left is going to be to reach out to us to say, hey, I want to host this. Hey, I have a question about how we can do something. Any ideas, welcome. Happy to chat with you about that. But Rebecca, if you want to answer Ali's question, I think is the next one. And that was kind of like, are we assuming that the dedicated millages currently will expire? Are they not going to be reinstated? What are some of our thoughts about that?
Yeah, so on the millages, the idea is that they would expire over time and we can phase residents in. To the point that they are not expired and don't expire, then residents are not paying under this model, right? If you are paying millages, you are paying tax property, you are not included in the stormwater fee. So however long that goes on, that will be a recommendation of ours to expire the millages, either naturally or maybe all at a set time by the city council. That would be up to them to do that. And then we phase in residents at that point, because a stormwater fee is much fairer than the tax property dollars that go to it. We don't necessarily always know how much is getting spent on what. And with a stormwater fee, through our plan with that public transparency, we would know how much we're we're giving and how much of that is being spent and on what projects.
Yeah.
And then also in this plan, would sewage and water boards still be responsible for all gray infrastructure capital improvements? Yes, they would be. And so this new stormwater department essentially would be the overseeing agency to sort of manage what Sewage and Water Board is doing, as well as what Parks and Parkways is doing, as well as what ORS is doing, NORA with their CAP project. Is there overlap? We don't want to duplicate efforts. We want to combine forces if we can, as Joey's been saying. And so that is sort of what this department would be responsible for, and making sure that we're not missing anything either. Does that answer your question, Allie? I think it captures that last question too, of would all responsibility for stormwater be subsumed under this new department? I think I captured it right, but please, if you can come off mute or put in the chat.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, thanks for answering those questions. I guess in the spirit of having a department that makes transparent the flow of monies and where they're going. If millages are reinstated, those would be flowing directly to Sewage and Water Board, correct? So just making sure that like there's a method to capture that flow of money as well, if it's not going into this new stormwater department. I think that's where I was going with that. So thanks, guys.
Yeah, thank you, Allie. No, and that's a good point too. The public website won't just house necessarily what money is coming out of the stormwater fee, right? It could say, hey, there are these other projects happening across the city. Here's how they're being funded, whether that's through municipal bonds and debt financing, or whether that's through federal funding or city funding, the millages, for example. Hopefully it can be like a one-stop shop to learn more about stormwater and what's going on in the city around stormwater.
Yeah. I see there, Rebecca. Our next question is from Corby and from Dana, kind of about the fee in lieu and money is collected currently. Have we looked into that, as well as like some data on how many projects are allowed to pay fee in lieu? A big issue is that one-time fee they pay to manage stormwater for decades in the future, not equitable or reasonable.
Yeah, unfortunately, this is more of a Jessica question than it is for me. And I'm sorry that she's not on here, but what I can say is that I believe the idea is that when a stormwater fee comes up, this fee in lieu concept would be phased out. It would sort of override that fee in lieu, right? Everybody would be paying a stormwater fee. And so we have, to my knowledge, oh, Jessica is back. I'm very glad for that. But to my knowledge, we'll repeat the question for her. It would not, we have not done a hard look at the finances of the fee in lieu yet. Jessica, are you with us?
Yes, I'm back. Sorry, my computer gave up on me.
No worries. So do you have more? Corby asked a question in the chat. Has anyone looked into the fee in lieu and monies collected currently? And if so, what happened? If not, will you look into that? And then Dana added that a fee in lieu is a concern of mine. I would like to see data on how many projects are allowed to pay fee in lieu. A big issue is that is a one-time fee they pay not to manage stormwater for the decades in the future, not equitable or reasonable.
Yes. So I do have a little bit of an update. So I'm gonna put myself back here because I can. So the fee in lieu, for those who are maybe not familiar with the fee in lieu, when you pay into the stormwater, when you build a new building and you pay into the stormwater code, and you can actually pay a fee in lieu, which basically says, I'll pay a fee to opt out of the actual fee, not the fee, but the building stormwater management on my property. So the fee in lieu says I'll pay a one-time fee. So the fee in lieu allows people to not put stormwater management onto their property. So my understanding, the current structure right now is that the fee in lieu goes to DPW and ORS, and they work together to determine where that money will go. It's not a lot of money that's raised, right? So most people are choosing to do stormwater management on their property because they see the long-term benefit. I would also add that it's a one-time fee. So if we're not building a ton of new properties every single week in New Orleans, right? As we know, permitting is a challenge in itself. And so the money in the funds are not that vast. The new stormwater department that would be stood up would have to figure out if that fee in lieu would go away altogether, because now we have a fee. And that fee also is only applied to commercial. So it doesn't apply to residential. So that would be a determinant for the new stormwater department. But in terms of where the money goes right now, it goes into a pot of funds at DPW/ORS, and they decide where that money goes. But it's not a lot. I can't remember. I don't want to say a number and it'd be completely inaccurate. It was a few $100,000 the last time I had an update on that, and that might have been a year ago. And I don't know if that funding was allocated toward anything specific. So we can definitely get that question answered for you by reaching out to Megan Williams and Greg Nichols at ORS. They would probably have a better sense of if that money was used and how much is in the pot right now. But that's why we need a stormwater management department. We've had a couple of questions like, well, can we just do the fee without the department? Clearly, this is why you need it, right? Because there are so many nuances at the city level that need to be figured out and that don't work. We agree, Dana, and I'm not sure who asked the question also, but it just doesn't necessarily work. And having a fee allows us to have more widespread clarity around who would be paying and who would be paying. But I don't know if that gets to the heart of the question, but that's what I know at this moment.
Yeah.
Okay,
all-
this
Oh,
is
go ahead.
Corby. I don't really think you really completely answered my question. I'm already aware that there's fee in lieu of funding. We've already, between me and some other people, we've already looked into how much it actually is. We've actually gotten documentation from the city stating, showing exactly how much is there. My concern is what is going, if has the money actually been used? And if so, on what? And if it's not been used, what is going to happen to it once this other program comes in the bay? Is that money going to be folded in, or is just going to go wherever the city wants it to go?
Right. I think I don't know, maybe I feel like I answered your question, but I'll reiterate that the money that I know last time I checked has not been used. I don't know if and then that's a question that's not for me because I'm not a city employee. That's a question, again, for Megan Williams and Greg, and we're happy to connect you with them directly, or we can ask that question on your behalf and get that clarity. The thing is that you have to stand up a stormwater department first. And so the fee in lieu has existed for several years. In fact, the Water Collaborative played a large role in writing the original stormwater utility, and many of
I'm aware of that. I'm aware of that part of it.
Right.
I'm very versed on what's the fee in lieu of.
I'm not saying that you're not, ma'am. What I'm saying is that you're asking a preemptive question that we won't have the answer to yet. Right now, that money is sitting in a pot and it's allocated to DPW and ORS. If they're using the money and where it's going, I do not have the answer to that, but who would have the answer would be someone like Greg Nichols or Megan Williams. Because again, I'm not a city employee. I'm not sure how that money is moving. And there's no legal parameters in the current stormwater code to define that. So I'm in agreement with you. I'm saying that if our plan is to proceed, this new stormwater management department would determine, one, if the fee in lieu should exist and where that money should go. So that's something that is too far ahead for us to consider. Just like the millages, those are both in the same boat. We can't determine that until we build something to start with.
Yeah, and Corby, it's a great question because it does kind of, right, there's some of these like things that are hanging on or things that have been band-aids to solutions or to issues and haven't been full solutions. And so again, that's something that we would happily in tandem with when the stormwater department stood up and they do the research on parcels and things like that, we would be happy to I don't foresee us stopping doing any data collection. And it sounds like you know that part pretty well. And so I would even love to have a conversation with you about kind of like what you've seen. Is there any benefit to it? Because I'm not very well versed in it either. But I do want to please write these questions to us. The reaching out to us, you can do that there. Or if we didn't answer some parts of it, or we'll send kind of like a recap email as well. for everyone who was here. But that's all on the website, and we would love to talk to you all. I do want to be cognizant of time. We went a little over, I think, of what we were estimating for Q&A. But if there's any more questions, feel free to throw those in the chat if you have to leave, or you can just ask us those through other avenues as well, Instagram, etc. There's Taya put all the links there for you. I just want to thank you all again so much for being here. This is an ongoing conversation, and we're looking forward to having that. And we will be posting online on social media and in our newsletter or things like that about upcoming events and those kind of sector-based luncheons, roundtables that we were talking about. So thank you all again so much. Download the report, share with your friends, tag us in it. We're very excited. Thank you, Corby. Love the questions. I love when people are just as educated as I am on these topics, because it is, and more so, because then it's really fun, right? This is what we need to de-silo, is a lot of this kind of information and education. So thank you all again. Feel free to log off, and we'll go ahead and we'll see you next time around.
Thank you. And the recording and slides will be available to everyone who did register. So there was a few questions in the chat toward me directly. We will be sending that out shortly. Thank you. Thank you all for joining.
Have a great weekend, everyone.